I definitely felt the buzz when it was announced that you were going to be at Raw on Monday night. I think the whole city is very, very excited. I think the entire wrestling world is very excited. You know, you talk about a few of those moments in the past where they pretended to be you. There was one moment, and, you know, I'll never forget this, where Shawn Michaels went in the ring and he cut a promo and he talked about you, and he played your music. And I don't think I've ever felt as much hatred for a wrestler as I did in that time for Shawn Michaels. Do you remember that promo on Raw where he played your music and did all that? And what were you thinking when you were watching that?
Well, I don't know that I watched. I don't know that I caught it.
Okay.
I know I heard about it.
Yeah.
I heard about it, and I may have. I think I may have seen it on tape later. I do have a memory of it, so maybe I did watch it. But I was pretty angry at Shawn for a long time. Hate isn't a big enough word for what I had for Shawn, and it was almost became a bit of an obsession. You know, where I couldn't wait to run into Shawn Michaels one of these days somewhere. And, you know, as I got older, I realized that, you know, it's not good to carry around a lot of anger. And I think sometimes that I suffered my stroke because I was so caught up in a lot of this kind of stuff, like with anger and bitter, what happened with my brother Owen was really hard for me. It was a really challenging time for me, and I went through a lot of heartache in regard to that, especially because it all happened in the wrestling industry. And it affected my family, it affected my parents. And it was a heartbreak for not just me and my family, but I think the whole wrestling industry was deeply mourned what happened with my brother Owen. But I carried around a lot of bitterness and resentment for a long time, and I think some of that bitterness and resentment may have led to my stroke that I suffered about a year later, 2 years later after Owen died. And you know, and slowly recovering over the years and pulled myself back up. And, you know, with the grace of God, I was blessed with a pretty good recovery. And I've always been, you know, sort of grateful that I got whatever recovery I did get out of all that. And the bitterness and the hatred and the resentment, all that stuff starts to fade pretty quick when you're suffering with, you know, trying to pull your whole life together from a stroke. And the grace of God and all the good things that spurred on a good recovery for me. Over years, I wrote my book, and I expressed everything that I needed to in my book. I'm still really proud of what I wrote in my book. I think it's probably my greatest achievement. But I'm glad that this opportunity presented itself, because I do have so much respect for what WWE did do for me and my career. I mean, I wouldn't trade my career for all the Hulk Hogans and all the Ultimate Warriors and all the John Cenas in the world. Will never have the career that I had, and I don't think anybody's going to have as many matches, and I don't think anybody's going to have as many great matches as I had. And they can try, they can keep trying, but I think I will, at least from my standpoint right now, I still am the best there is, the best there was, and the best there will be, and nobody's going to take that away from me. Not in Montreal, for sure.
Yeah, and you know what? You talk about that, and it's interesting. I don't think that there is any wrestler that has the amount of respect from his peers and from the fans, and also had the amount of success that you did, being on top, being that top guy, being that world champion. And I think you're 100% right, and I've always seen you as the greatest of all time. You talk about your book. I believe that it's the best wrestling book ever written, and it has a lot of great competition, but your book is just unbelievable. Has Vince McMahon read your book? Do you know if he's read it?
I doubt it. For some reason, I don't think so, but I don't know. I know Vince is an avid reader, so I don't know. If he wants to read a good book, he should read mine. But he might have a little trouble digesting it. But, I think in fairness to Vince, I think Vince knows what happened, and I think Vince has got I think today, we've talked enough, and kind of, my understanding of things today is that Vince and Shawn and everybody, I think everybody, cooler heads have prevailed today, and I think we all kind of regret the stubborn sort of positions that we took at the time, including me. And I know that I agitated Shawn a lot. I know that he agitated me a lot. There was a lot of little zingers back and forth, and that we were kind of, we were kind of like two spoiled kids fighting with each other. And Vince McMahon was the parent that had to pick one or the other, and he picked Shawn, and Shawn was a little younger, and Shawn was going to be the star, his star of the future, the next step up for him. And that's a business decision, and I really don't have any problem with that. I never had any problem with that earlier in my career, like when whatever happened with Vince. It's his company. My problems with Shawn were on a personal level, and it's too bad that they interfered with our match. But I will say that Montreal itself, it seemed like the most fitting place for that to ever happen. And it's easy to look back on it today and sort of second guess different parts of it, or I should have done this, or Shawn should have done that, or Vince could have done this instead. But what happened is what happened, and in the end, after the dust is all settled, especially 15 years later, I look back on it and go, that was probably my defining moment as a human being. Everything, my whole life summed up in that moment, in that few seconds, to what am I going to do about this humiliation that they've done to me in front of some of my most loved fans in the world in Montreal. And I've been back and forth to Montreal over the years, and I get stopped by cabbies and people on the street. And I know that I've seen people cry and tell me how much it meant to them. They were out in the stands that day, and they watched the whole thing happen. And, it was it's a Canadian moment. I've been right up there with when the Canadians beat the Russians in hockey. I think it was a defining moment. And when you watch Shawn Michaels lay out the Canadian flag in the middle of the ring and at the Montreal Forum that day and screw it right on the mat kind of thing, and then you watch me come out with the Canadian flag with my son and the fans, and I think you understand that there's a lot more at stake than what's been portrayed in the storyline. There's a lot of real Canadian emotion. This is a real Canadian hero that's dedicated his life to wrestling, going out to the ring to stand up for what he believes in, and he's got a guy that's got absolutely no respect that is waiting for him. And I think when I look at it, I think fans were deeply moved by what happened, and in a lot of ways it was my darkest hour. But it was those kind of moments and the way I handled that whole thing. I think when I look back, I wouldn't change one thing that I did anyway.
Yeah.
And I know that fans, in Canada, the Montreal Screwjob is kind of like, where were you when they shot JFK kind of thing? Were you on the grassy knoll, or were you, I know so many people that tie in that moment. It's like a unique Canadian moment that every Canadian that watched wrestling had the same pain in their heart that I did, and they saw and felt everything that happened the way I did. And it's that kind of emotion and that kind of respect that got me voted number 39 greatest Canadian. And I think wrestling fans 15 years later, still hold me in high regard just because of how I handled myself that day. And I never look back on it as a mistake that I handled things poorly or I didn't do the right thing. I thought I did everything right down to the punch on Vince McMahon.